The small apartment smelled faintly of medicine and old wood. The walls had patches where paint had peeled, and the floorboards creaked with every step. A girl sat on a little stool in the corner, her fingers hovering above an old piano. The instrument had scratches and a few chipped keys, but to her, it was the most beautiful thing in the world. She tapped one key, then another, trying to remember the simple tune she had learned the night before. Her mother's weak cough came from the other room, reminding her why she had to keep trying. Life had not been easy for them. The mother had been sick for a long time, and the girl had become more than just a child in the house. She was also a caretaker. She cooked small meals, cleaned what she could, and made sure her mother took the medicines the doctor prescribed. There were days when she felt like the walls themselves were pressing down on her, heavy with worry. Bills lay scattered on the table, letters demanding payments, and she often wondered if they would ever see a day without stress. Despite the struggles, music had always been a small escape. The girl could sit at the piano for hours, pressing the keys slowly, letting the sound fill the empty corners of the apartment. She didn't need fancy lessons or a perfect technique. She only needed to feel. Each note carried her thoughts, her fears, her love for her mother, and sometimes, her silent dreams of a better life. At night, when the city outside became quiet, she would practice until her fingers hurt and her eyes were heavy. It was the only time she felt free from the constant worries of bills and sickness. Her mother often watched her from the doorway. She would smile softly, her eyes filled with both pride and sadness. She knew the girl's talent was special, but she also knew how hard life could be. Some nights, she would whisper, "Don't stop. Keep playing, even if the world doesn't see it yet." The girl would nod, though inside, she often wondered if anyone would ever hear her music outside these four walls. School had been a challenge too. The girl had friends, but she felt different from them. While other children played and laughed without thinking of tomorrow, she carried the weight of responsibility. She tried not to complain, not to show how tired or worried she was, because she didn't want anyone to feel sorry for her. Music became her secret world, where she could dream of something bigger, something better. One cold morning, as sunlight struggled to pass through the thin curtains, the girl noticed a flyer pinned to the notice board at school. It was colorful, with pictures of grand pianos and sparkling lights. The words jumped out at her. A charity music competition, judged by a famous millionaire who loved discovering hidden talent. Her heart skipped a beat. The prize money could help pay for her mother's medicine, maybe even help them move to a better place. But just thinking about performing in front of strangers made her stomach twist with nerves. She had never played in front of anyone outside her mother, and the thought of a large crowd, bright lights, and serious judges was terrifying. At home, she showed the flyer to her mother. Her mother's frail hands trembled as she took it, her eyes lighting up for the first time in weeks. "You could do this," she said softly. "You could help us, and maybe the world will see what I already know." The girl felt a mix of hope and fear. She wanted to try, but she also feared failing in front of everyone. Still, she could see the excitement in her mother's eyes, and that made her heart ache. She wanted to give her mother hope, not disappointment. For the next few days, she practiced harder than ever. She chose a simple tune she had learned long ago, a melody that carried both sadness and hope. She worked on each note until her fingers knew exactly where to go. Sometimes she would play the tune so softly that only the piano could hear, and sometimes she would play louder, imagining the applause of a cheering crowd. Her neighbor, an old retired music teacher, noticed her dedication. She had been listening quietly for a few days before knocking gently on the door one evening. "You have something special," the teacher said, "but you have to believe in yourself too. Talent alone isn't enough. Courage matters just as much." The girl nodded, feeling a mix of pride and nervousness. She had talent, yes, but courage? That was harder. The thought of performing in front of judges, people who might criticize her every note, made her hands shake. The teacher smiled kindly. "Start small. Play for me. Let's see what you can do without fear." So the girl did. She played the simple tune for the first time outside her home. Her fingers trembled at first, But as the notes filled the small room, she felt a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. She could feel the emotions she had buried in her chest pouring out through the music. The teacher nodded, her eyes misty. "That's the music that touches hearts," she said. "Never let anyone tell you it's not enough. You're ready." The words gave the girl a flicker of hope. She still felt nervous, but the idea of performing in the competition slowly became less frightening. She imagined her mother smiling, tears in her eyes, as the music echoed in a large hall. She imagined a chance to make life a little easier for both of them, to step out of the shadows of worry, even if only for a moment. Evenings became her time to prepare. She would light a small lamp, sit on the piano stool, and let her fingers dance across the keys. She played the tune again and again, memorizing each note, feeling each emotion in her heart. The apartment would fill with sound, and for a while the world outside seemed to disappear. Her mother would sit quietly, watching, sometimes humming softly along. Those moments became their sanctuary, a fragile bubble of peace in a life that had been otherwise hard and uncertain. Despite her determination, fear never completely left her. She worried about tripping over the keys, forgetting a note, or looking awkward in front of the audience. She worried about being laughed at or dismissed. But every time she looked at her mother, pale and weak yet smiling with hope, she found a little more courage. She realized that this wasn't just about music. It was about love, about survival, about holding on to the possibility of a better life. One night, after hours of practice, she finally sat back and let her hands rest. The apartment was quiet except for the soft ticking of an old clock. She thought about the competition, about the bright stage and the audience, and her heart pounded. She whispered to herself, "I can do this. I have to do this." Her mother, hearing her from the next room, nodded in encouragement, her frail voice barely above a whisper. "You can. I believe in you." The girl went to bed that night with a mixture of fear and hope. She imagined stepping onto a stage, seeing the faces of strangers, feeling the spotlight on her. She imagined her fingers gliding over the keys, the simple tune filling the room, touching hearts she had never met. She imagined her mother, smiling proudly, safe and well, and for the first time in a long while, she dreamed of a life where worry didn't weigh down every moment. The next morning, she awoke early, eager to continue practice. Each note she played felt like a step toward something bigger, something that could change their lives. The small apartment, once filled with fear and uncertainty, now had music as a constant companion. The girl knew that no matter what happened, she would keep playing, because the music carried her love for her mother, her dreams, and her courage. In that quiet corner with the old piano, a small but determined girl began to prepare for a moment that could change everything. She didn't know if the competition would be easy or if she would succeed, but she knew that she had to try. Music had given her hope before, and now it was her chance to show the world what her heart could say. And so, every day, she practiced, every note a whisper of hope, every chord a silent promise to her mother. She didn't play for fame or riches. She played for love, for survival, and for the possibility that one small tune could carry them both to a brighter future. The apartment remained humble, the floorboards creaking, the medicine bottles lined on the table, the bills scattered. But within that small space, a melody of hope was growing, quiet but strong, ready to take its first step into the world. And somewhere deep inside, the girl knew that this simple tune could be more than music. It could be a lifeline, a bridge to a moment where dreams, courage, and love could meet in a way that changed everything. The morning light crept slowly into the small apartment, and the girl sat at the piano, staring at the flyer she had brought home from school. The words still seemed too big, too bright. Charity music competition, millionaire judge, life-changing opportunity. Her fingers hovered above the keys, but she did not play. Instead, she kept looking at the flyer as if it held the answers to all her questions. Her mother was in the kitchen, trying to make a small breakfast despite feeling weak and tired. She watched her daughter quietly. There was a spark of hope in her eyes that she had not felt for weeks. She finally spoke, her voice soft and careful. "You could try it, you know? You might really have a chance." The girl shook her head. "I don't know. Everyone else will be so much better. I'm just me. I don't even have real lessons." She looked down at the flyer, imagining a grand stage, a room full of perfectly trained musicians, and the judge, a man whose reputation alone made her knees feel weak. "What if I make a fool of myself?" Her mother placed a hand over hers. "It doesn't matter what they think. You have something they can't buy. You have heart. And sometimes, that is worth more than anything else." Her voice trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from hope. "We've been struggling so long. This could help us. You could help me." The girl bit her lip, torn between fear and desire. She loved music, but she had never performed in front of anyone outside their small apartment. The thought of strangers, of bright lights, and of judgment made her stomach twist. Yet, the possibility of helping her mother, of maybe easing her suffering, made her heart beat faster. She nodded slowly, feeling a tiny spark of courage. Over the next few days, she became obsessed with the idea. She spent every free moment at the piano, practicing the simple tune she had chosen. It was not a complex piece, but it was full of feeling. Each note carried her emotions, her love, her worry, her hope, and her dreams. The melody was small and gentle, yet it held a quiet strength. She imagined it traveling across the room, filling the hearts of strangers, touching them in ways words could not. Her neighbor, the retired music teacher, had been watching her from a distance. One afternoon, she knocked on the door, holding a cup of tea. "I hear you practicing," she said with a kind smile. "Would you play for me?" The girl hesitated, then nodded. She sat at the piano, her fingers trembling slightly. She began to play. At first, the notes were shaky, but as she continued, they grew stronger, more confident. The teacher listened quietly, her eyes softening. When the last note faded, she clapped gently. "You see? You have something real here. People will feel it when you play. You just have to believe that you deserve to be heard." The girl's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and fear. It was one thing to hear praise from someone she knew, but it was another to imagine performing in front of strangers, on a stage, with judges who might not understand her music at all. Still, the teacher's words stayed with her. "Talent alone isn't enough," the teacher said. "Courage matters just as much. If you have both, you can go far." Every evening, after her mother went to bed, she would sit at the piano under the small lamp and practice until her fingers ached. She memorized each note, feeling it with her heart rather than her mind. She imagined the competition, imagining herself stepping onto a grand stage, feeling the bright lights and the gaze of the audience. She pictured her mother watching, smiling proudly, tears in her eyes. Each time she imagined that, her fingers moved more confidently across the keys. But fear never left completely. There were nights when she would stop playing and cover her face with her hands. She worried about forgetting the notes, about looking foolish, about failing in front of everyone. She worried that no matter how much heart she put into the music, it might not be enough. But every time fear crept in, she would think of her mother, fragile and tired, and the weight of bills and medicine. And every time she found a little more courage. One morning, she walked past the notice board at school again. Other students were laughing and chatting, showing off their own talents. Some had joined private music schools, taken lessons for years, or even had experience performing on small stages. The girl felt small, insignificant, and unprepared. But then she remembered the flyer, her mother's encouragement, and the teacher's words. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "I can do this. I have to try." Back at home, she made a small plan. She would practice every day, refine her tune, and build her confidence little by little. She would not worry about being perfect. She would focus on being honest with her music, letting it tell her story. She would play for herself first, for her mother second, and for the audience last. That way, even if things went wrong, she would know she had given her best. Her mother noticed the change in her. The girl seemed lighter somehow, her back straighter, her eyes brighter. Even when her mother felt weak and tired, she smiled more. "You seem ready," her mother said one evening. "Not just for the competition, but for anything." The girl hugged her mother tightly. She could feel her mother's frailty, but also the strength that love gave them both. She realized that the courage she needed was not just for herself. It was for her mother too. In the following days, she began imagining every detail of the competition. She pictured walking onto the stage, feeling the cold wood beneath her feet, seeing the audience sitting silently, waiting for the first note. She imagined her hands on the piano, the keys worn under her fingers, the simple tune flowing from her heart. She pictured the millionaire judge, someone who had probably seen thousands of performers, suddenly pausing, leaning forward, listening. The thought both terrified and inspired her. She also began imagining the possibilities afterward. If she could win or even do well, the money might pay for her mother's treatments, maybe even give them a small apartment with sunlight and warmth. She allowed herself a small moment of daydreaming, imagining a life without constant fear, a life where her mother could rest and smile without pain. She knew she could not depend on the outcome alone, but imagining it gave her strength to keep practicing. Her neighbor continued to help her. Sometimes she would sit quietly while the girl played, giving advice on posture, fingering, or timing. Other times, she simply listened, letting the girl feel her music without judgment. Each session made the girl a little more confident. She began to understand that music was not about impressing people with fast fingers or complicated notes. It was about telling a story, expressing feelings that words could not. That realization made her heart feel lighter and her playing more natural. At night, when the apartment was quiet, she would close her eyes and play as if no one were listening. Sometimes she imagined her mother well and healthy, walking beside her in a park, the sun warm on their faces. Sometimes she imagined the stage, the audience leaning forward, moved by every note. Each time, her confidence grew, and the music became a bridge between her fears and her hopes. One afternoon, she received a letter confirming her registration for the competition. Her hands shook as she held it. Felt real now, more real than anything she had imagined. The competition date was still weeks away, but the first step had been taken. She ran to her mother, waving the letter. "It's real," she said, her voice trembling. "We're really going." Her mother's eyes filled with tears, and she embraced her daughter tightly. "I am so proud of you," she whispered. "No matter what happens, you have already done something brave. You have hope, and hope is stronger than anything else." The girl felt a warmth in her chest. For the first time, the fear of failure felt smaller than the possibility of hope. From that day on, every practice session had a purpose. She did not just play for herself or for her mother. She played to prepare for the stage, to prepare for the moment when she would finally share her music with the world. She practiced slowly, carefully, learning to listen to every note, every pause, every emotion the music could carry. She imagined the audience, imagined the judge, imagined the applause, but most of all, she imagined helping her mother. That thought became her fuel, giving her courage when nerves tried to take over. Weeks passed, and the girl continued her preparation. She learned to control her fear, to turn it into focus. She learned that mistakes were part of the process, not the end of the world. Each note played, each hour spent at the piano, became a small victory. The small apartment, once filled with worry and illness, was now filled with sound, with hope, and with the quiet determination of a girl who refused to give up. And so the day drew closer. She knew the journey ahead would not be easy. She knew the stage would be bright, the audience full of strangers, and the judge critical. But she also knew that she had prepared, that she had courage, and that her music carried her love, her dreams, and her hope for her mother's life. The simple tune she had practiced for weeks was ready to speak for her when words could not. In the quiet moments, when she sat at the piano and let the melody flow, she felt a deep sense of purpose. She understood that the music was more than a competition entry. It was a promise to herself, to her mother, and to the world that even in the hardest circumstances, hope could shine through. She had taken the first real step toward something bigger, something life-changing, and for the first time, she believed that her small tune might carry them both to a brighter future. The morning of the competition arrived with a strange mix of excitement and fear. The girl woke early, her heart pounding as sunlight poured through the curtains of their small apartment. She dressed carefully, choosing the clothes that made her feel neat but not flashy. Her mother, sitting quietly at the kitchen table, gave her a soft smile, one that carried both pride and worry. "Remember," she said, "it's not about being perfect, just play with your heart." The journey to the competition hall felt long and strange. The city seemed brighter, more bustling than usual. Cars honked, people hurried by, and the buildings towered like giants above them. The girl clutched the flyer in her hand as if it were a talisman, a reminder that she had earned the right to be here. Her mother held her hand gently, offering quiet support, but neither spoke much. Words felt small compared to the emotions swirling inside them. When they arrived at the hall, the girl's breath caught. It was enormous, filled with polished wood, shining lights, and rows of seats stretching far back. A large stage dominated the room, a grand piano standing at its center. Other participants were already there, some practicing with elegant, confident movements. Their music flowed easily, complex and precise. The girl felt a twinge of fear. She had never seen so many talented musicians at once, and suddenly her simple tune seemed fragile, insignificant. Her mother squeezed her hand. "Don't compare yourself to them," she whispered. "Your music is yours. Let it speak." The girl nodded, trying to calm her racing thoughts. She walked toward the stage, feeling the cold marble under her shoes. Her hands were clammy, her stomach twisting with nerves. The hall staff guided her to a waiting area, where she could tune the piano and get used to the space. She sat quietly, closing her eyes, imagining the melody she had practiced countless times. Other competitors chatted nervously or smiled confidently, offering friendly or dismissive nods. Some looked at her with curiosity, others barely noticed. She felt small and unprepared, but she reminded herself of what her mother and the teacher had said. Courage mattered. Heart mattered. She had both, and that was enough. Finally, her name was called. A staff member led her to the stage. The lights were blinding at first, and the audience was a sea of faces, all staring at her. She felt frozen for a moment, the piano in front of her looking bigger and more intimidating than she had imagined. Her fingers hovered above the keys, and she could hear the quiet murmurs of the audience settling down. Taking a deep breath, she reminded herself of why she was here. She thought of her mother, frail but proud, sitting in the front row. She thought of the weeks of practice, the evenings of quiet determination, and the courage she had found within herself. Slowly, her fingers pressed the first key. The note rang out clear and soft, a small sound in the vast hall. First, the melody was shaky. Her hands trembled, and her heart raced. She heard a cough in the audience, a shifting of chairs, and the sound of the air conditioning humming. But as she continued, the music began to flow more naturally. Each note carried her feelings, her love, her fear, her hope. She played as if speaking directly from her heart, letting the audience hear the story that words could not tell. The audience leaned in, surprised by the honesty in the music. There were no flashy tricks, no complicated runs, just a simple tune full of emotion. The simplicity itself was moving. People began to sit straighter, listening carefully, letting the sound reach them. Some closed their eyes, letting the melody wash over them, while others looked at the girl with curiosity and admiration. The millionaire judge, sitting at the front, furrowed his brow. He had seen countless performers, many with years of training and expensive lessons. Most had impressed with skill, precision, and showmanship. But this girl, so small, so seemingly fragile, played in a way that spoke directly to something deeper. The judge leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, eyes fixed on her hands as they moved over the keys. Her fingers moved with growing confidence. The melody rose and fell, soft and gentle, yet full of strength. She felt the fear fading, replaced by a quiet determination. Each note was a word, each chord a sentence, telling the story of her life, her love for her mother, and her hope for a brighter future. She no longer played for perfection or applause. She played for the people who mattered most, for the hearts she wanted to touch. Halfway through the piece, a few audience members exchanged glances, visibly moved by the music. The room was quiet except for the piano, the sound filling every corner. Her mother's eyes glistened with tears, and the girl stole a quick glance at her. The sight made her heart swell. She felt stronger than ever, as if her love for her mother was lifting her hands, guiding her fingers, carrying her through the melody. The final notes approached, and she played with everything she had left inside. The last chord lingered in the air, soft and full of emotion, before fading into silence. For a moment no one moved. The audience held its breath, stunned by the simplicity and depth of what they had just heard. Then, slowly, a ripple of applause began, quiet at first, then growing steadily into a wave of clapping and murmurs. The judge sat back in his chair, clearly impressed. He rarely showed emotion during performances, but now his eyes were bright, and a small smile played at the corners of his mouth. He had been looking for talent, yes, but he had not expected to be moved in this way. The music had reached him, not just as skillful playing, but as an honest, heartfelt story. The girl stood, trembling slightly, and bowed to the audience. Her heart was racing, and her hands shook, but the fear that had gripped her before had mostly vanished. She had faced the stage, faced the audience, and faced herself. She had done more than play notes. She had told a story, shared her heart, and left a mark on everyone who listened. After leaving the stage, she went to sit with her mother. Her mother's eyes were shining with tears, her lips curved in a proud smile. "You did it," she whispered. "You didn't just play. You spoke with your heart." The girl hugged her mother tightly, feeling a mixture of relief, joy, and lingering nerves. She had done it. She had faced her fear and shared her music with the world. Back in the waiting area, other contestants nodded in respect or whispered compliments. Some were surprised by the girl's courage and talent. Others quietly admired her for standing out without flashy tricks. She realized that performance was not just about technique. It was about connection, honesty, and courage. She had given all three, and the feeling of accomplishment warmed her from the inside out. Later, the judge called her forward. His presence was imposing yet kind. "Your music," he said, his voice calm but full of feeling, "is different from anything I have heard in a long time. It is honest, it is pure, and it speaks directly to the heart. Tell me about yourself, about your life, about your music." The girl hesitated, nervous again, but spoke slowly, telling him about her mother, their struggles, and her love for music. She told him about the evenings spent practicing in the small apartment, about how each note was a piece of her life. The judge listened intently, nodding occasionally, clearly moved. He asked questions about her dreams and hopes, and she answered honestly, feeling more confident with each word. When she finished, the judge smiled. "You have something rare, not just skill but courage and heart. That is what makes music truly powerful." The girl felt a surge of pride and relief. The fear, though still there in the background, seemed smaller now. She had not just performed. She had shared a piece of herself, and it had mattered. Afterward, she returned to her mother, tears of joy streaming down both their faces. Her mother held her hands, whispering words of love and gratitude. "You have given me hope," she said. "You have shown me that even when life is hard, love and courage can make a difference." The girl hugged her tightly, feeling the warmth of that bond, stronger than any fear or doubt she had carried. As the day ended, the girl realized that she had crossed an invisible line. She had faced the stage, the audience, and the judge, and she had survived and even thrived. She had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. She had learned that music could speak when words failed. And she had learned that love, for her mother and for herself, could carry her further than she had ever imagined. That night, back in their small apartment, she sat at the piano once more. The room was quiet except for the soft ticking of the clock and the gentle sound of her playing. This time she played not for a competition, not for a judge, but for herself and her mother. Each note was full of gratitude, courage, and hope. She knew the journey was far from over, but she also knew that she had taken the first real steps into a new life, one filled with possibility, music, and love. And in the stillness of that evening, she felt something she had never felt before. A quiet certainty that her music, her courage, and her heart had the power to change more than just her own life. After the performance, the girl felt a mix of relief, exhaustion, and a strange kind of excitement. She had faced the bright lights, the audience, and the millionaire judge, and she had played with everything in her heart. The applause still rang in her ears, and her mother's smile burned brightly in her memory. But she knew the competition was not over. The final results had yet to be announced, and she could only wait. Back in the waiting area, she sat quietly, hands folded on her lap. The other contestants were chatting, some nervously, some confidently, about their own performances. The girl felt a pang of self-doubt. Her tune had been simple, not flashy or complex like some of the others. What if it wasn't enough? What if the judge thought she was too small, too inexperienced? Her fingers trembled as she pressed them together, wishing she could disappear into the quiet of the hall. Her mother reached out, placing a gentle hand on hers. "Don't worry about what others think," she said softly. "You played with your heart. That is worth more than anything else." Her words were comforting, but the girl could feel her own heartbeat hammering in her chest. She took a deep breath, remembering the hours of practice, the nights spent perfecting every note. She reminded herself that courage and honesty had brought her here. That thought steadied her slightly. The judge stood up and walked toward the stage, his expression serious but attentive. He carried a folder and a pen, ready to take notes for the final decision. The girl's stomach tightened. She had never spoken to him directly, but now he was coming her way, and she felt a strange mix of fear and anticipation. Would he ask her questions? Would he challenge her or worse, dismiss her? When he reached her, he smiled faintly. "Your performance," he said, "was unlike any I have heard today. Simple, yes, but full of life, full of feeling. It made me pause, listen, and think. Tell me, how long have you been playing?" The girl hesitated, then answered quietly, "I started when I was very little, mostly on my own. I practice every day and I love it. It helps me feel better, and it helps my mother." Her voice trembled, but she kept her eyes on him. She wanted him to understand that this music was more than just sound. It was her life, her story, her heart. The judge nodded slowly, jotting down a few notes. "I can see that," he said. "It is rare to see someone who plays not for recognition or fame, but for something deeper. Your music speaks in a way that skill alone cannot. It carries honesty, courage, and love." The girl felt her chest swell. No one had ever described her playing in this way before. Most of the time, she had been told to improve, to learn faster, to sound more polished. But this man, who had likely seen hundreds of performers, recognized the heart behind the notes. It made her feel small and proud at the same time, as if all her efforts, her fear, and her love had finally been seen. Her mother, sitting close by, reached out to squeeze her hand. The warmth of that touch reminded her that whatever happened next, she had already done something incredible. She had shared her music, her story, and her heart with the world. That in itself was a victory. The judge looked around the hall, observing the other contestants. Some had played with flawless technique, others with bold, confident flair. But as he glanced back at the girl, he seemed to pause. There was something in her performance, something intangible, that lingered in his mind. He had judged countless competitions, seen hundreds of performances, yet her music stayed with him, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. He asked her a few more questions, about her life, her mother, and her dreams. The girl answered honestly, sharing the struggles of daily life, the long nights of practice, and the hope that music could bring a better future. She did not exaggerate or embellish. She simply spoke from the heart. And with every word, She felt a little lighter, as if sharing her story aloud made it more tangible, more real. The judge nodded thoughtfully. It is clear that your music comes from experience, from life, from love. That is what makes it powerful. Most performers play to impress. You play to connect. That is rare. His words made her cheeks flush. She had never thought of herself as remarkable. She had only wanted to help her mother, to share something beautiful. But hearing him say this made her feel that perhaps, just perhaps, she had something worth sharing with the world. As the day went on, the results were slowly announced. Contestants were called one by one, their names read aloud as they received praise or critique. Each time her name was skipped, her stomach tightened. She kept her hands folded, trying to remain calm, but every small sound made her heart jump. She wanted to hope, but fear clung to her like a shadow. Finally, her name was called. She stood, trembling, and walked to the stage once more. The judge greeted her with a nod. "We have considered all the performances," he said. "Your music is different. It does not rely on technique alone, but on honesty. It does not seek applause, but understanding. That is what makes it unforgettable." He paused, letting his words sink in. The girl could feel the eyes of the audience on her, but she focused on her mother, who was smiling, tears in her eyes. She felt a surge of courage, remembering the nights of practice, the quiet moments of hope, the love that had carried her here. The judge continued, "We would like to offer you a scholarship to continue your music, as well as support for your family. Your performance reminded us that talent is not just skill, but heart. You have both in abundance." The girl could hardly believe what she was hearing. Her knees felt weak, and her hands trembled. Her mother gasped softly, covering her mouth with her hands. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and she reached out to hold her daughter's hands tightly. "You did it," she whispered. "You really did it." The girl's eyes filled with tears as well. All the fear, the hours of practice, the worry, and the longing melted away into relief and joy. She realized that this moment was more than a prize. It was recognition of every small step she had taken, every quiet night spent at the piano, every note played with love. It was validation that courage, love, and honesty could carry her further than she had ever imagined. The judge spoke again, his voice warm. "Remember this feeling. Remember why you play. Talent can open doors, but heart keeps them open. You have both, and that will take you far." The girl nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you. Thank you so much." She could barely find words to express the gratitude she felt, not just for the prize, but for being seen, for being understood, for being recognized for her heart. Her mother hugged her tightly, and the girl felt the weight of the last few years lift slightly. The worry, the fear, the endless struggle. It was still there, but it now felt lighter, shared with someone who understood and willing to help. For the first time in a long while, she felt hope that was steady, not fragile. The hall slowly emptied, and the girl and her mother stayed behind for a while. She played the piano one last time in the quiet room, letting the notes flow freely, not for competition, not for the judge, but for themselves. Each note carried relief, joy, and love. The simple tune that had once seemed too small to matter now felt powerful, as if it had grown with every tear, every practice, and every moment of courage. Walking out of the hall, the girl felt different. She was still small, still fragile in some ways, but she carried something new inside. A quiet confidence, a sense of purpose, and the knowledge that her music, her courage, and her love could touch hearts. Her mother walked beside her, holding her hand, smiling through tears. The future still had challenges, but for the first time it seemed possible, bright and full of hope. That night, back in their modest apartment, they sat together at the piano. The girl played the simple tune once more, letting it fill the room with sound. Her mother listened, smiling softly, her hand resting on her daughter's shoulder. The girl played with freedom now, not bound by fear or doubt, but guided by heart and love. As the music lingered in the quiet room, the girl understood something important. Life would still have difficulties, illness, and struggle, But courage, honesty, and love could carry her through more than she had imagined. Her music had not only moved others, it had changed their lives. It had given them hope, recognition, and a chance at something better. And in that small apartment, the simple piano, once worn and scratched, now seemed to glow with possibility. The girl knew this was only the beginning, that her journey was far from over. But she also knew that no matter what came next, she had faced fear, shared her heart, and discovered that the power of music, courage, and love could truly change lives. The days after the competition were unlike anything the girl had ever experienced. Life in their small apartment began to change, slowly at first, and then with a momentum that felt almost magical. The scholarship from the judge allowed her to take proper music lessons, and he also arranged for financial help so her mother could get the care she needed without fear of bills piling up. For the first time in years, the apartment felt lighter, less heavy with worry. Her mother rested more, her cheeks regaining a soft warmth that had been missing for months. She watched her daughter practice, her eyes filled with pride and gratitude. The girl had been playing the piano for love, for hope, and now that love had returned to them in ways neither of them could have imagined. Even on difficult days, when illness still tugged at her mother's strength, they had a new sense of possibility. The girl began attending music lessons at a small school arranged by the judge. The teachers were kind and patient, recognizing her talent and heart. She learned techniques she had never known, but she never lost the simplicity and honesty that had made her music so special. Every lesson reminded her that music was not only about skill but also about expressing what was inside. She found joy in learning, not pressure, and her confidence grew steadily. At home, she continued to play her simple tune, though now it was richer, more nuanced. She would sit at the piano in the quiet evenings, sometimes imagining the audience, sometimes imagining just her mother and herself. Each note carried the journey they had been through, the fear, the struggle, the hope, and the triumph. Music became a bridge that connected their past to a brighter future. Word of her performance began to spread quietly. Neighbors, teachers, and even people from the competition mentioned how remarkable it was that a small, shy girl had moved a millionaire judge and a crowded audience with a simple melody. But the girl did not seek attention. She played because it was part of her life, because it was how she communicated feelings too big for words. Recognition was welcome, but it was not the reason she played. One afternoon, the judge called her again. He had organized a small recital for her to perform for a select audience of music lovers, teachers, and patrons. He wanted her talent to be seen and appreciated, but in a setting that encouraged honesty rather than pressure. The girl was nervous at first, imagining strangers and the bright lights, but she reminded herself of how far she had already come. She had played for her mother, for herself, and for an audience that truly listened. She could do this too. The recital hall was smaller than the competition, but still impressive. The girl took a deep breath as she approached the piano. She remembered the nervous tremors of her first performance and realized how much she had grown since then. Her fingers rested on the keys, and she began to play her melody. It flowed gently at first, then more confidently, each note carrying the depth of her journey. The audience was silent, listening intently, some with eyes closed, some leaning forward in their seats. When she finished, there was a pause, a moment of quiet that felt heavy with emotion. Then the applause began, steady and warm. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, moved by the honesty in her music. The girl smiled, a shy but radiant smile, and glanced at her mother, who was beaming with tears in her eyes. It was a moment of triumph, not because of the applause, but because of the journey it represented. Life began to settle into a new rhythm. The judge continued to support her, arranging more lessons and opportunities for her to perform. Her mother's health improved steadily, and the apartment, once weighed down with stress, now felt alive with music and hope. Friends and neighbors sometimes stopped by to hear her play, and the girl welcomed them, playing freely without fear or hesitation. She had discovered that sharing her music brought joy to others, just as it had always brought comfort to her. Despite the attention and new opportunities, the girl never forgot where she had come from. She continued to play her simple tune, the melody that had carried her through fear and struggle. Each time she played it, she remembered the nights spent in a small apartment, the worry for her mother, and the courage it had taken to face a stage for the first time. That tune became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even small, honest things could change lives. Her mother often sat quietly as she played, sometimes humming along softly. Their bond, already strong, grew even deeper. Music had given them a way to communicate beyond words, a language of heart and soul that neither illness nor worry could diminish. They laughed more, shared more moments of quiet happiness, and felt a new sense of security that had once seemed impossible. The girl's confidence continued to grow. She began to write her own melodies, simple but heartfelt, capturing small moments of life and emotion. She shared these pieces with her teachers, her mother, and occasionally at small local gatherings. People were moved not by complexity or grandeur, but by the honesty and purity of her music. Her gift was not just in the notes she played, but in the way she made others feel seen, touched, and understood. Over time, the judges' support opened doors for her that she had never imagined. She was invited to perform at small concerts and charity events, each performance a chance to touch more hearts. She did not seek fame or wealth. She sought only to share her music and the story it carried. With each performance, she realized that her simple tune, once a fragile expression in a small apartment, could resonate far beyond the walls that had once contained her life. Her life had changed, but she remained humble and grounded. She remembered the fear she had felt before her first performance, the nights spent practicing alone, and the moments of doubt that had almost stopped her. She understood now that courage was not about never feeling fear. It was about continuing despite it. Her music had been a bridge from fear to hope, from struggle to opportunity, and from quiet desperation to a life filled with possibility. One evening, as the girl and her mother sat together, she played the melody that had started it all. The notes floated through the room, soft and steady, carrying all the memories and emotions of the journey. Her mother closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. The girl smiled quietly, feeling the strength of love and perseverance between them. She knew that no matter what challenges remained, they could face them together, with music as their companion and hope as their guide. The girl's story became an inspiration to those around her. People admired her not just for her talent, but for her courage, resilience, and love. She had begun as a small, frightened child playing alone in a modest apartment. Through determination, honesty, and heart, she had found a way to reach others, touch lives, and create a future full of opportunity. Her music had saved more than her mother's health. It had saved their spirits, and in a quiet way, had given them both a life filled with hope. Even as her opportunities grew, she continued to focus on what mattered most. The simple joy of playing, the bond with her mother, and the honesty of her music. Fame and recognition were welcome, but they were never the goal. She had learned that the truest power of music was in its ability to communicate, to comfort, and to inspire. That power, she realized, had always been within her, waiting to be discovered. Her mother often said, "You have given me a second chance at life, through your music, your courage, and your heart." The girl understood that it was more than just her talent that had made the difference. It was her willingness to act, to keep going despite fear, and to play with honesty and love. The lessons she had learned would stay with her forever. Time passed, and the girl continued to grow, both as a musician and as a person. She remained humble, kind, and grateful, never forgetting the apartment where it all began, the piano that had carried her hopes, and the mother who had always believed in her. Each note she played was a testament to the journey, a story told without words, a melody that could heal and inspire. In the quiet moments, when she played for herself and her mother, she felt the full circle of her journey. The simple tune that had once been a fragile whisper in a small room now echoed with strength, hope, and love. It reminded her that courage could open doors, love could heal, and music could change lives. And so, in that small apartment now filled with light and warmth, The girl and her mother sat together. The piano sang, carrying the story of struggle, hope, and triumph. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had led them to a place where music, love, and courage had created a new life. And as the last notes faded into the evening air, the girl knew that the melody of hope she had started would continue to grow, reaching far beyond their home, touching hearts and inspiring others for years to come.